What were the cyber activities by the State Department? And this is something that they do constantly. They bring out these accusations. They're quite loud. They're intended to, get people riled up. But then they provide no actual details or facts. But we are much better than most of the American media and quite careful in that we do not say false state, right? And he wasn't put in jail. It was just probation. And he was supposed to come every 6 months or so to appear in court. He didn't. That's how I believe I'm not illegal. So this is why he went
You
to
believe
jail.
the story that he died of a heart attack?
No, I don't believe the story. I'm not. I don't. I know that it was very unfortunate for the Russian government that he died.
American citizen, if you had to choose which president you would vote for, who would you vote for, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Recently, the United States Department of State accused Russian state media of playing a key role in carrying out covert influence activities aimed at undermining the US elections and democracy. No less than the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the accusations in person. And to address these accusations, we're joined by Dmitry Leontiev from RT International. Welcome to the show, Dmitry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Frankie, for having me. Yeah, and again, I apologize to your viewers of my attire. Didn't know I'll be on camera today. Otherwise, I would look as nice as you, or at least try.
You look just fine. But moving to the first question, of course, the US says that Russia today has moved beyond being a media outlet and has cyber capabilities. The US further alleged that, and I'm quoting here, that RT is also engaged in information operations, covert influence, and military procurement. These operations are targeting countries around the world, including in Europe, Africa, and North and South America. What's your reaction to that?
Well, let's take it one by one.
Sure.
Now, the accusation about cyber operations. This is an interesting accusation, weird one. We actually have a person who they listed on. He is working for us. It's not a secret. What happened with us is that because of United States and mostly the Ukrainian allies, after 2022, our websites got DDoSed almost constantly. We had always these attacks on it. We needed somebody who will protect our websites, and so this is their goal. But what I want to know, okay, so they found this person and they stated this is the State Department, this is the CIA, this is the FBI. I mean, they have all kinds of capabilities, and they stated we have these cyber operations, and they stated the person. What were the cyber activities by the State Department? And this is something that they do constantly. They bring out these accusations. They're quite loud. They're intended to, get people riled up. But then they provide no actual details or facts, because, of course, they don't have them. And it's almost impossible for us to say anything about it because, this is why the reason why RT's response was kind of in a joking manner, because it's hard to take things like this seriously. Now, let's go by step of what was stated. I think the second one was information warfare. Well, I don't even know what that means. We are a channel. You can check for whatever we say. It's online. It's everywhere. It's not a secretive thing, right? This is our point, so people actually see and watch us. If they find one single untrue thing, one falsehood, during the 13 years, I mean, there might be some inconsistencies that we had, which we corrected, very soon. But we are much better than most of the American media and quite careful in that we do not say false statements. And the reason for that has been because since 2014, before that, but especially since 2014, we had to be very careful of anything they say because they always look for an excuse to ban us in the West. So they don't, again, provide any examples. I don't understand what information warfare means. Does that mean we just say things that they don't agree with? Well, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just last week, in fact, perhaps 10 days ago, US Justice Department said that two employees of Russia's RT secretly paid $10 million to Tennessee-based media outlet to influence. Perhaps that's what they mean by information warfare.
Well, okay. So here, this is a careful thing. As your viewers should know, we actually have employees currently working in the United States. considering what is happening right now, and this is a pending case, and this is not a sanction case, this is a matter of indictment. This is quite dangerous. For anything I say, as Americans like to say, will and be used against them in a court of law. So about this, I'm quite careful on what they say. But what they're accusing of us is the fact is that we had bloggers who we hired so they can openly talk about what they talk about. I don't understand what the crime is.
And pay them $10 million.
Maybe in the
That's a
United States
massive.
is
That's a
yeah.
huge sum of money.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not. Well, first of all, this sum of money was, I don't know what the sum of money was and who it was paid for. This is not something that I do or function. I work on the, content, not an accountant. But that's not a crime, right? You can't, like, what is the crime? You paying somebody more than they should make? How much is not a big sum of money? How many? I mean, that's a ridiculous thing. They want to put people in jail accusing them of this, which is an insane thing. So first, what they're saying is first they banned us. We can't go on RT under our own logo. Now we can't talk to anybody in the United States. That is a crime as well. That is an insane concept. But what I want to say is that this is something you haven't asked, and this is quite important. I think this is very important for India. The point of there were two, as you well said, there were two press conferences by Mr. Blinken.
Yes.
The first one was about United States, but the second one wasn't about United States. The second was United States exporting its censorship globally. What they're saying to the world is that we think RT is so bad while providing no evidence for it. We need to convince, and sometimes not only convince, but make other countries accept our censorship. So this is a very audacious, it's almost an insane concept that you believe in your country, people should not be hearing this. But that's not enough for you. What you're saying is that I will export my censorship to everywhere, including India.
See, fact of the matter is, it's not just the US. Europe, European Union, in fact, 2 years ago, right after what Russia calls a special military operation, and of course, Ukraine and Europe calls an invasion after 24th of February, I think in March 2022, European Union also banned RT. So it's not just the US which is worried about RTN and RT's content and its reporting.
Well, this is an easy answer. You're, I'm sure, a very well-qualified journalist. If you look for 10 years, find me one foreign policy decision that the Europe went against the United States. One, on anything. On Iran, on China. This is what they do. They follow along. Europeans, it is sad because it's a beautiful continent and has a huge history, quite interesting. They had a difficult relationship with India, but they had much to give to the world. Now they're following along every single thing that the United States does, and this is what they do, and so they parrot United States narratives. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. It's obvious to the rest of the world. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How about I flip the question slightly and I ask you, why don't you give me an example wherein RT's coverage of an event, including the Russia-Ukraine conflict, differed from Russian government's official stance?
Here's the thing: is that we are not. I'm not. What do you mean by Russian official stance? Because we have the State Department as the our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have the Ministry of Defense, and we have the presidents, and we have the Parliament, and they have different stances. We have this cartoonish idea. I'm sorry, I keep using the word cartoonish, but it is insane. Like, we have this I don't know, level of, control by one single person, which is overwhelming. Everybody says the same thing. We're a country of 140 million people. We have all kinds of stances. We have people in the government who are a lot more liberal than Vladimir Putin. We have people in the government who are a lot more conservative than Vladimir Putin. There's all kinds of stances. For example, right now, there's this idea. They're talking about, as you're well aware, of hitting Russian proper inside Russian territory. The response to how we should respond to it is all kinds of responses. All kinds of people think different things on this. And it's kind of scary, but a very important discussion in Russia. So I'm not sure of how we can say what is the U.S. Do we believe in RT that in Ukraine we're in the right and we're fighting because we've been provoked for about 12 years, that there's been 8-year war going on there? which every one of our correspondents has been and seen, and the world forgot for 8 years, and now they woken up in 2022 like it started. Yes, people in RT do believe that, but that's not a stance of the Russian government. That's basically the stance of the Russian people. If you look at it, it's about 85, maybe 90% believe that. So I'm not sure how to answer that question. So yeah, that's maybe I did.
All right, but that does tell our viewers. I mean, what I wanted to ask you have to an extent addressed it. So I'll leave it at that. But moving on, the next question that I want to ask you
Actually, you know
is
what? I'm sorry. Again, I want to talk because this is an Indian audience, and I wanted to ask, uh, if there is a war between India and Pakistan, God forbid, how many in the Indian media would be taking the stance of the Pakistan government? How many? How would that work? Just imagine if
I
that
can
would
give
happen
you
in your country.
I can give you multiple instances where various media outlets have, and they, in terms of their reportage, have taken very different stands from the official stand of the government. I'm not talking in the context of India-Pakistan war,
Right,
but
but
I'm
this is
talking in the
why. This is
context of
war. You know, you gave me that example, of course, but this is war. I mean, we have taken many stances against
except
all kinds of officials
except
in the Russian government but this is war, and this is so people are dying.
a war that Russia started on 24th of
No,
February
no, 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 no,
2022.
no, no, no. Started in 2014, and this is very important. And thousands of people died in 2014 and 2015 and 2016. There was a ceasefire which was negotiated because Ukraine was losing. That ceasefire was called the Minsk II agreements. This is very important. And the two countries which were co-signers of that ceasefire was France and Germany. Now, for a number of years, Ukraine refused to abide by the ceasefire. And we found out why, because Angela Merkel, who was then the signer of the ceasefire, after she quit, she said, we're just faking it. We were just preparing Ukraine for war. Nobody wanted to actually go through with the ceasefire. So this is very important. I understand this is the Western narrative, that the war started in 2022, but it's disrespectful for the thousands of people who died before that.
How about we do this? Just so that everybody understands exactly how RT functions. I mean, of course, I did see the video that RT made, that slightly caricaturish video where the allegations which have been made against RT, you tried to sort of, mock them. So why don't you, as a journalist, tell me how RT functions? So as a journalist, you pitch a story to your editor, the story gets approved. What's the process? If you can take us through that.
Sure, I think mainly, I guess, like most other companies. But I can tell you, because I'm actually participate in this process very closely. This is my main job. So every morning we have a daily meeting. We look at topics. We have producers who suggest topics. We also have news things which have happened and we don't know. We prepare usually sometimes a day in advance if there are larger stories. We try to consider what can we bring new to the story. This is very important because there's so much media out there, and if we could just keep repeating the same thing, why watch us and not somebody else? There are things which are important to Russia in itself, because especially if they are, geographically. So maybe we do a little more stories on things surrounding Russia, just like any country do. But we try, and especially after 2022, do a lot more stories on the global south. This is really interesting. The fact that we were sanctioned and not allowed to be seen in the West is a blessing in disguise, because we had so many more resources to think about stories in Indonesia and in India and sub-Saharan Africa. And for me as a journalist, which I've been working for years on Western stories, and they're so tiresome and they're always the same. I mean, if we can talk about the trans issue one more time, it's impossible. It's boring. The whole culture war in the United States. But then we started to do stories, for example, about India, and it's really interesting. So it has been a blessing. But as a process, it's the same process, I assume, as in most media, and so that's basically it.
You're choosing to call it a blessing in disguise, and I can understand the rationale because explained it very logically. But having said that, if you were to talk about the impact of these sanctions and, of course, the ban by the European Union on the network, what is that going to be?
Well, have been on the sanctions in the EU forever, right? This is only in the
Yes.
United States, you know. So the direct impact is that we have people working there, and we're not sure what is going to happen to them. I can give you a little bit, detailed. We had an
Sure.
employee who, the FBI at 5 o'clock in the morning, she was almost naked. They came in, 25 people with automatic guns. They put her under, forcefully on the floor. They searched her completely naked for 7 hours. They were talking to her for seven, not talking, as you understand. It was quite, and this is a journalist. This is a girl who is very, influenced in the whole thing. She barely knows what was happening. Thankfully, she managed to fly out of the United States because we were worried that God knows what happened. We still have people there, and this is for us right now. Besides, journalistic thing in there, we understand that there's a conflict, an information war, but we see that the United States is ready to do anything. It could put anybody in jail. We saw what happened to Assange. I mean, he was there for 20 years for God knows what charges, and they see us as a threat, and we believe that there is a possibility that the people who work for us could be in danger, and that is the most important thing. We're trying to figure out this. We're trying to figure out legally, but even lawyers who work in the United States, they say your situation is so weird and it's so, but we can't even predict what the next actions will be. But we were thinking about how to work with the United States. Again, what we don't want is to put people in perilous situations because they're working for us. So we're trying to figure out how to do that, and hopefully it will work. But we understand that the situation, wasn't created by us, a media company. This is, what happened. We're part of a huge geopolitical conflict, but we do have people working for us there. And now that is the most important thing, to try to figure out what to do, maybe to shutter all our operations in the United States completely, but we don't want to do that. We actually had a lot of viewers in the United States. There's a lot of people who actually care what we have to say. But again, it's a matter of risk to the people who are working there right now. That's the most important thing.
Well, I understand and appreciate the example that you gave me of the journalist who was treated perhaps in a very rough manner by the investigative agencies in the US. The counter would be, I mean, Russia, when it comes to treating political activists and, even journalists, but doesn't have a very great record either. I mean, the case of Alexi Navalny is something which you'll be countered with. And how will you respond to that?
Yeah, well, we can, I'm ready to talk to you about anything. If you want to talk about Navalny wasn't a journalist, right? He was a
I mean, he's a political
political
activist,
actor.
yes.
Yeah, he had political ambitions. He wasn't jailed because of this. Yeah, he was jailed because there was a lawsuit against him, and he lost it about 15 to 12 years ago, right? And he wasn't put in jail. It was just probation, and he was supposed to come every 6 months or so to appear in court. He didn't. That's how I believe. I'm not a legal stuff. This is why he went
You
to
believe the
jail.
story that he died of a heart attack?
No, I don't believe the story. I'm not. I don't. I know that it was very unfortunate for the Russian government that he died. He posed no threat to the Russian government at any point. This is actually very important for India to understand. There is opposition in Russia, but it's not liberal. Liberal opposition almost has no influence, and Russia never has. There is opposition on the right, more conservative, and that's something which is a real opposition, and that's something maybe the government could be feeling like they're real opponents. Navalny was never a real opponent. He never had support more than 2-3%. And when he went to jail, he wasn't an opponent at all. All the people who he worked for got exchanged for, and I believe, and I think he was supposed to be exchanged for as well. Now, this is an interesting story, and maybe you would like to follow up on this. If people in India care enough about Navalny. Navalny has this vice chair. His name is Mr. Volkov. I don't know if he is aware for us. So he had an assassination attempt, or at least an assault attempt, on him a few months ago. Now, his team is accusing Mr. Nevzlin, who is another opposition figure, to be ordering this attempt. Okay, this has nothing to do with Russian government at all. So it's two opposition figures fighting against each other. Now, I don't have any information on this. it seems like the accusations are credible. The courts will figure it out. But I believe that this person wanted to assassinate, or at least have an assault. The idea was to beat him up enough and send him to Russia. That was their idea. On the vice, it could have been the head as well. Now, the second thing I wanted to say is that even Mr. Budanov, who's the head of the Ukrainian intelligence service, said Navalny was not killed by the Russian government. Even Wall Street Journal, which was surprising for me, said the Russian government had nothing to do with arresting him. Now, it just doesn't make any sense. If you ever been to Russia and talked to anybody, we had a lot of bad press about this, and he posed zero threat to anything. So I mean, I don't understand why even logically that would happen. So yeah, again, what I'm saying is speculative because I'm not aware of any actual information. This is what I believe. Anybody can make up their own mind. If you want to talk about okay, so now you mentioned this. You want to talk about journalists. This is an interesting issue because before the war, 2022, our media landscape was very varied. We had more liberal news sites and websites than pro-government ones. Actually, there was a ton of them. Most of them were funded by American NGOs. I'm sure in India you have a ton of those as well. They're quite well funded, and they have a lot of people working for them. Sometimes inside Russia, and they're sometimes outside of Russia. The issue would happen in 2022. Those people, a lot of those not all of those media, instead of supporting peace, which is very understandable for a liberal, they started supporting Ukraine and the United States to the point that a lot of their members start funding the
What do you
Ukraine
mean?
army.
What do you mean
And
by?
so there was an issue.
What do you mean by? Sorry, I'm interrupting you. But what do you mean by supporting peace? How could they have supported peace by?
Oh, you can support peace in Russia. If you're against, you can be anti-war in Russia and there's no issue. You just can't support the enemy. Do you see what I'm saying? You could say war is bad and you could be against the war. You can go in the Kremlin right now and be against the war.
So you're
There is
saying.
opposition leaders in
So you're
Moscow
saying.
who say the war is horrible. I don't support war. This is a mistake. That is fine. That is your. But the
No, but
idea
are
that
you
you are
saying?
actually sending money to a foreign army, which is happening. I mean, you could check this. It's happening all over with a lot of the U.S. funded Russian media, and that is
No, but are
beyond the
you
pale,
saying?
right?
But are you
Yeah.
saying? And correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying that although you can be against war while you're in Russia, but as a news outlet, you cannot side with the enemy? I mean, you cannot report the war as you see it.
No. You could report the war as you see it, but you can't
Okay.
side the enemy. Do you see what I'm saying? You can. Let's talk about. We're talking about editorial things. There's factual things, right? You could. Okay, so
Of
the
course.
Ukrainian army is here, Russian army is here. Of course, you can say that. Just and hundreds of people are saying that all over, and also Russian social media, TV, or whatever. You can also have an editorial position that I don't support war. I'm against it. But you cannot be supporting an enemy and especially funding that enemy, which is what is happening. Meaning they at donation basis on funding the enemy. And I do not believe that there's very many countries which actually would function differently in this situation than Russia. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think this is when we have, I mean, again, we have people dying in this war. This is a serious thing for us.
On both sides.
It's not a joke. So when you are like, for example, I'll give you an example. RT has worked for dissident Americans for years, and there was a ton of Americans who were against the war in Iraq. A ton of them.
Sure.
None of them send money to Saddam Hussein or wish death on their own soldiers. It's a really different thing. You can be against the war. You can demonstrate in Washington D.C. and say Bush was a war criminal. Okay, but you cannot be supporting Saddam Hussein. And none of these networks would be working in the United States if they were doing that, right?
So basically, you're accusing U.S. outlets of exactly the same thing which RT has been accused of by the U.S. in this case.
Well, explain how so.
And by that, I mean to say, for that, I will have to quote Blinken, because here's his statement. And he has, of course, said that Russia also engaged in information operations, covert influence, military procurement. The operations are targeting countries around the world. And there is one particular part of the quote that I want to refer to in particular. A large online crowdfunding platform operating within the quasi-intelligence state-funded RT and through social media channels is providing material support and weaponry to Russia's military units in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Isn't
okay,
that
well,
what you were
this
accusing US American outlets of?
not U.S. American. There are Russian. I mean, they have
Okay.
Russian people working for them. Outlets which worked fine before 2022, but had to rechange. They went, yes, they're operating from Europe now, and some from the United States. Were funded from the United States, who are openly garnering and money for the Ukrainian army. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe American companies are doing this the same thing. I'm not sure. I don't know what you mean and what Blinken was talking about. I'm sorry, not you. What Blinken was talking about is the fact that our channel, and not our channel really, but our foundation and our head of our channel was
Yeah.
collecting money for the Russian army. But I don't know. You don't need the intelligence services for that. That was done in the open since 2022. We've been talking about this. So this is a volunteer fund, and this is we believe we're fighting a war, and we were collecting money so our soldiers have food, equipment, and so
And a
and
news
so yeah.
network should be involved in that.
What?
And a news network should be involved in that.
Well, the news network wasn't involved in it. The people from the news network were
Right.
involved in it, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
from. I mean, as a private person, was involved in that, and she's, maybe you could say she's famous because she's the editor of RT, but it wasn't like RT was collecting money in her own funds. It's just the people who work for RT are also involved in that, and okay, we're not embarrassed by it. It wasn't hidden. It was, you didn't need the CIA. It was out there, which is okay.
Which
Yeah.
which brings me to, of course, the assassination attempt against the editor-in-chief recently. Who do you think? I mean, there are all kinds of reports out there, but now that I have you, why not ask you? Who do you think was behind it?
Margarita.
Yes.
Yes. Uh,
Yes.
so, well, again, this is, I don't work. Despite what Blinken might think, I don't have intelligence officers telling me what is happening. I don't know, but this is something also important for your Indian viewers. There's a site called Miratvorets in Ukraine. It's a site of enemies of Ukraine. It's a kill list. And our editor-in-chief has been on this site, as well as
Yes.
many other Russians, for a long time. This is a site which is directly and openly supported by the Department of Defense of Ukraine. Now, there are people, including a friend of mine, Dasha Dugina, who've been murdered from this site by Ukrainians, and this is, I don't know, it's a big story. She's the daughter of a famous philosopher in Russia, and they blew up her
Yeah.
car, and we already know who did it, and I don't think this is a controversy. So, do we believe that assassination attempt on our chief was done by the Ukrainians? Yeah, very probable. But again, as good journalists, I don't have evidence of this, but it seems quite logical, and you can assume that this is what's happening. In fact, many of Ukrainian government officials have expressed desire to murder her, and not only her. So this is out in the open. But it could be anyone. But this is the reality that we live in.
Russia has always accused the US of waging a proxy war against Moscow. Do you think sanctions on RT are a part of that?
Yeah, I certainly think that they are part of it. We know that United States has for years been kind of the champion of free speech. This is what their idea was. It's the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Was very important for them. Now, something happened in 2015, 2016, and we know it was the election of Trump and Brexit. These are events. I'm not sure why, but these are events that changed the position of the State Department, and the position of many NGOs which are working for them, and the position of CIA. Now, what they have been doing is, now instead of championing free speech, what they're championing is the fight against disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. I'm quoting them directly from their website. What that means is, it from championing of free speech is became the champion of censorship. I think that the development of online, the development of social media, I feel like the State Department, not only them but Americans in general, thought they have lost control of the narrative, and so now they're trying to put it back. And RT is just part of the cog, which is is difficult for them to. It's much easier for them to control companies which are based in the United States. They can pressure them. There's all kinds of ways to figure out how they'll say what they need to say, or at least don't say what they don't want them to say. And it's relatively easy. But it's hard for them to do it with us. And so this is why, partially why they attacked RT. The second reason why, it's election time. Every single this is the third election cycle that every 4 years magically this Russian disinformation campaign appears. And we know for 3 years Donald Trump was accused that he was actually a puppet of Putin. This insane idea that we put a president, we are so powerful that if we put an actual American president, the most powerful country in the world. And they've been seriously talking, not just talking, but there was an investigation. I mean, if you look at CNN or MSNBC or New York Times, Washington Post, that's all they talked about. Now, last election, we had that Hunter Biden laptop story, right? So they had a computer with all kinds of ridiculous things. I don't know how much it would influence the election, but it could have. They said it's Russian disinformation, and who said it? 30, I think, intelligence agents, former intelligence, wrote a letter saying it's Russian disinformation. Of course, it was fake news. Again, they've been I don't know if American people actually buy it anymore. I'm not sure that they have to find a new thing, because I understand, like, we are this clever boogeyman that people watched Hollywood, and they have this accent, KGB, and we're so, evil, and it's so scary. But how long could it work for? I mean, at some point, you need to find a new story. But for now, this is the reality we have.
Right. Uh, it was great talking to you, Dimitri, but before I let you go, blasphemous as it may sound, if you were an American citizen, and I say blasphemous because, of course, you are a citizen of your country and a patriot, but if you were an American citizen, if you had to choose which president you would vote for, who would you vote for, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Oh no, neither. This is actually, I thought about this. I'm not against the United States per se. The people elite right now, I have an issue with. But they had presidents. If you look at what debate between Kennedy and Nixon, the level of intelligence of these people, and understanding and lack of, this, infantile reactions, stupidity, by in reality by both of them, and I would be, America's 300 million people. There's a ton of talented people in that country. There is no way that these are the two best candidates. That is just insane for me to think of. And I don't really care that much because I'm not American. It's their problem. But I would not be participating in this election if those were two choices. I mean, yeah, that's my opinion. I mean, this is not, again, not an opinion of RT. My personal opinion.
Your individual
I actually don't know what the opinion of RT about this topic is.
Right.
Another thing that Americans need to understand, and in Russia, we don't really care that much who wins the U.S. elections. We keep interfering in them, but we don't actually believe it makes much of a difference. We don't think that the U.S. foreign policy changes all that much with upcoming presidents. But no, okay.
Well, at least in terms of policies, it could have a very different impact on Russia-US relations, right?
Maybe. We don't actually believe that. I mean, most people. I mean, again, we can't look. We're not Nostradamus, right? We don't know, but we think that the U.S. government apparatus functions separately often from what the president says on election year, like pre-election cycles, right? They have this idea, and it's very rigid, right? And there are people who make decisions, and they make decisions for decades, and so if they would change, their decisions every 4 years, that probably might not work. So maybe, but we actually think it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters for Americans, right? That's, of course,
Right.
just for us.
Dimitri, thank you for taking other time and talking to us. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.